Would you like to introduce yourself, please, Liam?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. My name's Olivia. I'm currently working in Bristol as a surgical sister. I work on a surgical assessment unit, and I'm also co-founder of a company called Worksites, and we have a product called Rate My Shift. And I've been a nurse for roughly about 10 years now.
Fantastic. Thank you for that introduction. Now, you said something that had always caught my eyes is the product you said you yourself and your colleague, yeah, worked on.
Yes,
Can you
yeah.
just talk a bit more about that,
Yeah,
especially
absolutely.
for nurses who are curious to say, what's that?
Yeah, so we always actually say that we never set out to build an app. We set out to fix a problem, as nurses do, natural thinkers on the spot, and we build our workarounds. And it was roughly around 2020, but I think it was after the first wave of COVID. I went into a senior band six position. So in the trust that I was working in, it was called a junior sister role, and I really felt this kind of disconnect, I guess, between me and a more it's a more senior role, but it also it involved me going into the office more and looking at more quality. And you didn't have that same visibility that you would have as a nurse in charge on the wards. And I felt like because of that, people didn't come to me as much as they did speak up about issues. I didn't feel I knew the day to day as much as I would want to know. And Rate My Shift came about, I guess, to fix that problem, to strengthen those relationships, to get better communication, to create some form of like early warning school, but for nurses. So this early warning school for nurses is kind of this indicator of, I'm not feeling too great, or I'm feeling great, or not, or I need to check in. So what we did is we originally created a quality improvement project where we asked people to fill out and select a face that best represents how they're feeling at the end of their shift. And I think a lot of organizations have this. Like, I don't think I made it myself. I think it must have got from other people. But the key here was to date that piece of paper and to write your name. And then after that, they would put it into this box that was locked. And then every morning, I or my other band sixes would come in, take all those pieces of paper, and then they'd look through each one. And anyone that had a negative rating, so it was like an amber color or a red color at the time, they would require what we call a follow up. And what that means is we go up to them and say, let's talk about your shift rating the next time we see them. And we go into a room and we talk about that day. And the only question it asks is, how do you feel after your shift today? That's it. That's all we want to know. And we always say that you can't argue with how someone is feeling. And I'm very passionate about that. And we say it a lot in that person felt that was their experience. And my job isn't necessarily always to fix that, but to create a space to listen. And resilience is built where we talk about how we're feeling and we build that community together and team working. And it was a difficult time. So all the more reason to really understand how different people and individuals are impacted. What this actually did in my role is I gained a lot of good communication skills, leadership, compassionate listening, looked into lots of Michael West work, got really excited about this opportunity. And also I had probably 60% of my staff were international nurses. And what I found was culturally speaking up was not something that they would want to do. And they told me that in person, like they would rate their shift red and I'd say, why didn't you ask for help on the day? Like if you were struggling, and they'd say, well, I can't ask for help on the day, can I? And so we would work with them then, and they'd rate it again red and again red and again red. And we would still be patient enough to just try and get them to trust that by speaking up in the moment, you're actually going to get a better outcome than speaking up 5 days later, because it's not helping you 5 days later. So what we learned is through this communication, I understood people, I understood individuals, I understood skills. I gained a better appreciation for the everyday to then actually evidence the work that we're doing as managers, but also the work that the nurses and healthcare support workers were doing. And we thought, wow, this is local change and improvement in such a simple way. Imagine if an organization had that oversight of every single ward, every single area, every single person. So that's when we built the app, basically. And we luckily had friends that were in software, because I went around the organization for a long time looking for someone to build it for me, and people weren't really interested. Although innovation, this was, a few years ago, innovation has changed. But we then have been testing and piloting in different organizations to test the assumption that, one, people want this, because I wanted it on my ward and I loved it, but do other managers want this? And we always get asked, oh, isn't this another task? Isn't this another thing that managers have to do? And my argument is they're already doing it, but they're not creating that I guess equity, that we're not allowing the multiple people with different cultures and understanding to have that opportunity. And all this is an opportunity to communicate differently and then evidence the great work that we're doing to support them. And Annie and I have struggled. She's my co-founder. At the time, she was the ward sister. She was the one that was like, well, what if everyone could see this? And I was like, well, I didn't think about that. And then, yeah, we've been getting into the digital space since then, innovation. We're part of the clinical entrepreneur program. Annie's just been accepted on the NHS accelerator program, and we've just been getting into the business side of it. And I guess the reason we went into business was just because people told us to. Whereas like now I might do it differently if I knew, and kind of create more of a social movement, because it's so difficult to sell into the NHS. But I just think if I was to able to crowdfund or something like this, and just get it into the hands of every single nurse, then that would be great. Because that's what I ultimately want. But now it's thinking of that company, that business, that, you know, we have to have funds to be able to keep going. And I work full time, and so does Annie. So it's now getting to the point where we're juggling that quite a lot. And I love it. But it is trying to prioritize me in the midst of all that as well.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I was just following your story
Mm,
as you started, and honestly, I'm blown away, to be honest. Right. So you started off from the
mm,
problem was it was COVID time.
mm,
Nurses were stressed. You had lots of international nurses who culturally would not
mm,
really open up or
mm,
ask for help. So because of that problem that you witnessed every day, you looked about creating something to solve it.
mm,
And then you started off with a QA project, QI
mm,
project,
mm,
and then you were just using paper then. But it got to a point that you just thought, hang on, we need to evidence this properly. And then
mm.
that led to you developing this
Yeah.
ratio shift, that eventually your trust but accepted it. Is that correct? Yeah.
The bit of a negative spin on it, but yeah, no, at the time it was kind of not kind of, I think there was
Right.
just questions around like how much support and things that was needed at the time. It just didn't
Right.
really, again, it's that innovation mindset, that risk averse that we're finding time and time again, that is a struggle
Mm,
to get in. And like with anything that we create a company, so it just became a bit more, a bit harder to kind of secure. So I thought in order to, maintain my job, because I loved working there, qualified there, went into a senior role there, we would just not pilot or continue the digital version there and go elsewhere instead.
right. Right. I think we'll probably touch on that one later if you're
Mm,
happy to.
mm.
Then you went on to the clinical entrepreneurship program,
Yeah, yeah.
and you
There was
said
a
you're
few, yeah, there was a few things around that time actually that built up to it. But I probably got into it a year after that. I went on to the clinical entrepreneur program around the time we started getting pilots in different organizations. Yeah.
and then your colleague, your co-founder, did you say also
Mm.
got accepted in the another? Sorry, I didn't catch the name of the
Yeah,
program.
it's called the NHS Accelerator Program. She's this year.
NHS
Yeah.
Accelerator Program. And then at the moment, is there a number of trusts? Do you have a number of trusts that's
Mm,
have number of companies or NHS
mm.
organizations that are currently using these products at the moment?
Yeah, so we have been in four different areas: acute services, two acute trusts, so maternity and some surgical areas, two different trusts, and then we were in like an out of hours service and a community practice. But we've actually, in the last year, we've paused the use of Rate My Shift. Um, because we're creating version 2 on the basis of that information and feedback and things. And we're just about to launch in an organization, in a small ward again, and looking at how we could scale that, um, based on all of that information, how to make it easier, how to make it slicker, how to remind people to rate their shift. Because on paper, I could just go give people the paper and say, remember to rate your shift. Whereas like when it's on your phone, if they're going home, sometimes they forget. And it's how we embed that and how we kind of make it, the norm to rate their shift afterwards, because it's a new opportunity for them.
Absolutely. And I think I like what you said earlier on about the fact that it's what we do already.
Mm,
It's what you did already as a nurse in your role
yeah,
as a sister,
yeah,
as a manager of other people. But
yeah, exactly.
the tweak on it, the twist on it is the evidence in it, right?
Yeah,
And I think that's a big thing because most
mm,
of what we do as nurses, right, we do it without even thinking.
yeah,
But
exactly.
when we ask, what's the evidence? Can we share this across other to other NHS trusts? And then that's the bit where we struggle. Can you just speak a
Mm,
little bit more about
mm.
that, please?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, even as you were speaking then, I was thinking like, thinking of all the evidence of good care. So as a ward manager, I have to evidence the great quality of care that we're giving, and that is through staff feedback, patient feedback, complaints, datexes, which are incident forms, and then looking at all of our key performance indicators and how the roster is, what the study leave is. There's loads of things that I have to look at that evidence is good care, and one of them, that stands out, is being compliant in our audits, completing our audits, and looking at safe care. And sometimes that isn't always, the audits aren't always done. and that doesn't actually reflect on how great the care is sometimes. And it's really hard because obviously they're really important and there are risk assessments for our patients, but it's those
Hmm.
sort of things that we do so much that we struggle to evidence that. And an example is how much time is spent looking for a piece of equipment. Like if we were to able to evidence the impact that that has on an individual and see how many episodes of equipment issues have we had this week, and that's the sort of stuff we started drilling into. Is okay, 5 people now have complained about the fact that we don't have a dishwasher, and so we were able to use that information within my organization when we were on paper, use that information to say, look, this is what people are saying, this is the impact, can we get a new dishwasher, which we did. Things people were suggesting, things like improvements. Our international nurses were speaking up in real time, so they were actually able to then feel confident and get into more senior roles eventually, which was great. And it's these things that we just don't see and
Mm,
able to celebrate. And
mm,
what I was
mm.
able to do then is say, in the last month, because of Rate My Shift, right? Really, it's because of that. But because of Rate My Shift, we were able to do these things and celebrate it. Whereas when we don't look at what we're doing, or it's looked in the film of like quality, such as audits, it's got this negative spin on it where it's saying, we've only got 70% in this, but we've done great in these areas. But really, they're going to be looking at that 70%, aren't they? And with Rate My Shift, it's around how we kind of celebrate not just the bad shifts, but the good shifts as well, because there's always going to be bad shifts. And it's
Absolutely.
what we do about them. It's how we support each other. And people say that even on a busy, difficult shift, the most important thing for them is teamwork. And
Mm,
how do we
mm,
celebrate that?
mm, mm. Yeah, I've just got different questions in my head at the
Mm.
moment, but I'm really enjoying this conversation.
Me
So
too.
back to the Rate My app,
Yeah.
the product you have. Is it
Yeah.
like an app anybody can download on their personal phone?
Mm. So if you go on ratemyshift.app, that's the web link. So it's a web app. So it's a lot of organizations these days are using web applications rather than downloading it. But if you were to go onto your phone on that, you could download it onto your phone. But the website is ratemyshift.app. And then we are literally in the process in the next few weeks of creating an option to kind of set up your own team, but you have to pay for that. Whereas right now we're looking at getting into organizations, really testing things, refining it, and looking at that scalability, because the more people you have onboarded onto the app, the cheaper it is. And so with Rate My Shift, we want to create also a free community version. And like I said earlier about having people rating their shift, because I actually rate my shift on the app, but no one's actually looking at it. And it makes me feel good. So probably because it's mine. But yeah, so we're looking at getting a free version which people can download. And it's on the website, as I said, it's not downloadable on like
Okay.
Play or Apple. But the free version, obviously you wouldn't have that so what element. You wouldn't have your manager going and asking and looking at that. So that's why it's important to get into organizations that understand that culture and that responsibility and the importance of speaking up and having, because Rate My Shift is just a digital tool. It needs people that want to be curious and want to listen and want to understand. So the tool just gives data insights to this person did a red shift, can say you need to follow up. But it's the most important part is that follow-up conversation. And if whether they have the skills to really understand and take it in and coach and support that individual. And some managers might have that naturally, but I know that I don't now. I never got taught those skills. I just learned them as I went. And so part of our offer when we join and go to organizations is providing that training and providing that support and giving what we've been calling like a coaching wraparound. The fact that it's not your job to fix these things. It's not your job to come up with solutions. If that person went home late, don't just extend their time. Understand why they're going home late consistently. Because if they were coming in late, we'd be asking about that. So it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
really, support them. And that's the best way we can support them, is to allow them to have autonomy and allow them to feel that they can belong and contribute. It's all the Michael West compassion leadership stuff. And we kind of introduce that when we launch with an organization. That's part of our like launch package, is really drilling down and speaking to those managers and really understanding what skills they have and whether they need additional one-to-one skill with me and Annie. And we understand like that's not sustainable in terms of scale. So we're looking at the moment. I did an ad recently in LinkedIn of getting more coaches onboarded onto the platform, so then they can have different nurse leaders, and also getting more nurse coaches out there to actually speak to more people. And it's so it's a great opportunity. I'm really excited to go through that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that different elements it appears to be coming out of that. How are you going to manage it to make sure that it's doing what you set out to do from the onset? Obviously, there are going
Mm,
to be different learnings coming out, and obviously, what you're improving on your new version is based on the feedback you've
yeah,
received. But how
yeah.
are you going to manage it that whilst you're putting in the suggestion from other people, you're not going,
Mm,
you're able to manage the different angles that
mm.
the Rate My Shift might go, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think right now, because it's just me and Annie, and we've got a CTO, which is our He's our software developer company that they Alpha Lake AI, and his company, and he works with us as advisory as well, but he's working with us to build that kind of automation, I guess, out. So if they have a suggestion, they'd be able to ticket that suggestion. And if they had, if it has bugs or if it has things that needs changing or things like that, that would all be within the app so that we could look at that and evaluate that. But with anything, even if we were, in 20 organizations, we'd be constantly evaluating that. And they always say your first product should never be the end product, because it will have all these different things. And even now, like, speaking to different like charities and things that are wanting to get involved, like it's really understanding that a lot of people that are in the wellbeing space have the same outcome, but we're not a wellbeing tool, we're a communication tool. But we can have wellbeing support networks within it, such as the coaching, such as signposting to different charities that can support with finances or wellbeing needs and things like that. And it's a great opportunity, because what Rate My Shift is something that is in the hands of really busy nurses and healthcare support workers and non-clinical staff as well. And I think the kind of beauty of the simplicity is that we can build anything, but it's what we're setting out to do is really improving those relationships, allowing people to feel that they can speak up and giving them another option to do that on top of, because it's not stopping someone still coming in my office and going, oh, I've had a rubbish day yesterday. Like, it's not stopping that human interaction. It's not replacing any of that. It's giving people the option to try a different communication method and evidence it. Because what we ended up seeing in some trials is people would stop talking about it on the ward. And when you talk about it on the ward, someone else might not feel the same that you're feeling. And now this potential negativity is getting to everyone on their day when they might have been having a lovely day. And so what it started doing is people started using it as a kind of like movement, I guess, to be like, well, if you're feeling really bad, you should rate your shift. And then it stopped that kind of corridor conversation, stopped things from snowballing, and then created like this, this really good way of kind of capturing those insights. And we see a lot of ways to kind of increase that engagement through like gamification or giving like kudos to each other. Like, it might pop up to say, this person worked the shift with you, do you have any positive feedback? Like, there's loads of ideas, but I'm trying to like try not to run before I can walk. But yeah, there's lots of things that come out of it. And like, even like when we've piloted, people are saying, oh, you should make a Rate My Placement for students. I'm like, yeah, I should.
Yeah.
But yeah, so loads of suggestions.
Yeah, but fantastic. A couple of things you said. The first thing you said nobody taught us about the coaching element, that the things you have to learn, and that's what you're building on your version 2. So in my head, there's so many things we're not taught, right? Now, the first one is the coaching aspect, right? And the second one for me is the business and the entrepreneurship aspect, because for some nurses, they don't see themselves as being able to. I think business, some people might have a kind of like negative connotation to say, oh, you want to go into business? Oh, we are nurses. We're not meant to do that. So I was just wondering how are you able to move from being the typical, if I can use that word, nurse, to this place where you went through the clinical entrepreneurship program. Now you have a business that you have to look after. What helped you to get to where you are now, and how do you navigate that?
Yeah, it is a good question, because it's something that I find quite hard, because I want, especially like, so on the NHS clinical entrepreneur program, there's not many nurses on there, and I'm quite passionate about the fact that nurses actually have all the answers and that they have all the ideas, and they've probably got so many things there that they could like turn into a business or turn into some social movement or just improving care and commercializing that. But we just don't have the systems in place to be able to support that. Like, we don't even have allocated study leave within our organizations to give people to I've created it, but it has to be within my budget to be able to do that. But I see the importance of allowing people to go off of the ward and think about improvement and think about time, and even go off the ward and come back on the ward and do some audits, rather than doing it in a time where you're responsible for 7 or 8 patients and that is your day and it's busy. And I think what led me to it is quality improvement projects. And I continuously, even in my job now, will say, look, guys, there's some QI projects here available. But again, if they don't really understand that, when people are looking to develop into a band 6, that's what I always say, look at QI, look at continuous improvement, because when you're a band 6, you're paid a little bit more with a bit more responsibility. And you need to be showing that you're able to do other things on top of your role, such as QI projects, that you're improving a service, that you're looking at the bigger picture. And I think what I did is I was looking at that. I was looking at, like, I started off, I did like I looked at the food menus in my organization, and went on to a program called the Rising Stars. And what they did is they put people that they felt that had potential of developing onto this course, loads of different people, loads of different backgrounds, but mainly all nurses. They offered coaching. We did a structured QI project. So I improved the food menu. And at the end, we had to present. And I presented to like matrons, and I remember at the time going, "Oh my god, I'm presenting to a matron at the band 5." But now I'm like, "Oh, just people, aren't they?" But I remember there was this lady that came, and she was one of the nursing directors, and she sat there and talked about her nursing journey, and it wasn't typical band 5, band 6, band 7, band 8, band 9. It was band 5 for a few years, then
Mm,
into a different job for a few years, then into a 6, then into a different 6, then into a 7. Then she took time out and went to Australia for a few years. Like there was a real,
mm,
like, it just made me think that there's no rush with my
mm,
career. And
mm,
I really did want to get into a band 6 role, and I stopped and really thought about, like, what do I actually want? And my role was very people focused, and I started developing like my own skills around that. And that's when I started looking at QI stuff, and that's when I created Rate My Shift. And that QI element, it is similar in a way to innovation. So then I innovated to the fact that I thought, well, imagine if this could be digital. And I put a survey out to the team, and I said, if Rate My Shift was digital, like, how would this benefit you? Would that be better? And then start thinking about the opportunities of what that would give.
mm,
And it wasn't until I got introduced within the organization to the commercial team that I then started thinking commercially.
mm,
And
mm,
if I wasn't introduced to them, I probably would have just, I don't know what I really don't know what I would have done. But I think it's then that I was started thinking about business, and there's lots of support networks within different. So in Bristol, we've got the Health Innovation Network West of England, which
mm,
can support people that may have ideas. But the Clinical Entrepreneur Program, which is starting again this year, but is one of those things where you've kind of got an idea and you don't really know what to do with it, but you're
mm,
thinking about like that business side of it, and you're not really sure.
mm,
And I think it's really inclusive in that way. But yeah, I do agree that like we are kind of told to kind of focus on the day to day, and that in itself is tiring. So
yeah.
to then have to do a QI project on top of that. So I went to a Royal College of Nursing. It's the foundation run a grant every year. It's like £2,500 to £3,000 they give people for QI projects. And we submitted Rate My Shift and got that, but also they then do a celebratory event. And they did it in December, and I attended that. And there's so many, majority of them are band 5s,
Mm,
ward nurses or physios. Um,
mm,
and I sat there, and like they showed, like we all had our posters, and we were all talking about like the work that we were doing. And I was just like, this is why I came into nursing. Like in
mm,
the midst of
mm,
the busyness and the how hard it is right now, people are still improving care for our patients. And
mm,
it just takes one person and that belief to understand, what else can I do with this? How do I get this? How do I share this? And it's that, that's what we're kind of missing, is that someone within the system to think, okay, you've done this brilliant QI project, let's submit it for an award. For example, we won the Nursing Times Award for Digital and Transformation last year, and we just submitted
mm,
ourselves to it. Like, we
mm,
submitted
mm.
ourselves, got shortlisted, went to the event and won it. We were like, what? And
Wow.
in my organization, no one submitted anything to the Nursing Times. And if we just put ourselves out there a bit more and had those people around us to do that, I feel like you make that then switch of like, is this innovation or is this business or is this entrepreneurship?
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for really sharing that. There's some couple of things resonated with me from what you said. You said something about um, the QI projects that as band 6, that's what you would recommend for anyone looking at, okay, I want to progress in my career.
Mm,
The question should be, what are you working on? What evidence do you have to show you are really, like you said, looking at the bigger picture, right?
mm,
You talked about
mm,
that, and I'm like,
mm,
yeah, that's a very valid point for those who are asking questions to
mm,
say, where do I start? Start with the QI projects from where you are. It
mm.
doesn't have to be big. It's just something.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
started with the feed menu, right?
yeah,
And then you went on to present to this
mm,
groups of matrons, and
yeah,
then
yeah.
and that led you to participate in the, you said, Rising Star, and that sounds like an
Mm.
in-house
It was
innovation, right?
in-house, yeah, like development
In-house,
program, yeah.
right? So you put yourself forward, right?
Mm,
You put yourself forward for the RCN grants. You put yourself forward
mm,
for the Nursing Times Award, and I guess there's a team around that, and that's about having the courage to be
mm,
audacious, having
mm,
the courage to
mm.
say, I'm going to do that. What
Yeah,
was the worst case? What was the worst thing to happen? I'm
yeah,
going to
yeah.
try that. And I think, yeah, that's something that's it's really important, and that
Mm,
resonates with me so
mm,
much. So
mm,
thank you for sharing that. And I think you also mentioned something around I just wanted, if you are able to touch on how you got into the clinical entrepreneurship program.
mm, mm,
You said something about the fact that there were very few nurses on there
mm,
when you
mm.
applied,
Yeah.
and how will you, if a nurse is listening to you now and want to just done something, maybe a little QI, and the nurse is thinking, is this for me or not? What would you say to that nurse listening?
Mm. So I guess it's if they've done, correct me if I'm wrong, if they've done a QI project and thought, I could do something bigger than this, or this could give a lot of people support or a lot of patient support. First thing I would think, first thing I do is look at the clinical entrepreneur program for a start. Because the clinical entrepreneur program is when you've got an idea that you want to scale or create into a business. And some people don't. Some people are on the program and they've got an idea and they think, oh no, yeah, it's not a great idea, or they talk to people. But the reason there aren't nurses is because of that kind of link of like, is this innovation, or is this, it fixes something and then it's done. So
Right.
like, because you can, like with me, I did a QI project to kind of evidence that we didn't have enough vegan food on the menu.
Right.
And I collected all of the data around how staff didn't really understand veganism, and just like surveys and showed the importance, went to my catering department and they increased them to 15. Now, I can't scale that. I can't take that anyway. That's a QI project rather than something innovative. But
Right.
like, I went into my
Right.
treatment room the other day and they've got all these, my staff have made all these clips and things, created these things to hang bags off of. And I'm just like, oh God, that's innovation in my opinion. Like, you've created something to make your
Yeah.
life better at work. I mean, they
Absolutely.
could have just
Yeah.
come to me, we could have probably bought something, but I just think nurses just get on with it, don't they?
Yeah.
And I think if there's things like that, I've spoken to a lot of like doctors on the clinical entrepreneur program that I've created like digital versions of something paper. You know,
Mm,
it
mm,
doesn't have to just be digital, but it also could just be an idea or something.
mm,
And then through the program itself, that you apply for it online, you write down what you want to do, the problem, what you've done so far, background, you do it, you submit a video, and I do feel like majority of nurses that apply will get it because it's not enough and they need more nurses. And it's really understanding why are they not applying and why are all these doctors applying. But I do
mm.
think that the reason is that doctors have to do QI projects to
Right.
get into the
Yeah.
next year. So
Yeah.
F1s have to do QI work and then
Right.
F2s have to do QI work. I mean, I might be wrong, but there's just that different mindsets and they have that
Mm,
time. They're allowed to have study leave to
mm,
go and complete that work. And I think like if there are things that we're doing that could be built into something. So for example, I met someone in my organization that messaged me saying, I saw that you're a clinical entrepreneur. I've just been accepted on the program. And she was in a digital role and she created like within the clinical site team, created this software through just like Power BI of how
mm,
to like look at patients going from ED and how to track them. And it was a better way of using it, but it's through a Power BI, but it lacked a few things that Power
mm,
BI couldn't do. So she went on
mm,
to the program saying it needs all these things. And she
mm,
ended up not doing that in the end. And she ended up going into different things in her career, and she's quite senior now. But that's the path she chose, and that's something that she
mm,
then opened her up to all these other opportunities that came her way. So if you don't know, I just say just research and look at it and get onto LinkedIn. I always say that to my staff. If you're looking at like development stuff, a lot of people like yourself are on LinkedIn and advertising there. And we need more of our ward nurses and
mhm.
patient-facing nurses to be on LinkedIn because they're the ones that know have all the answers. I always say to myself, you do all the work, so you tell me what you need. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad that I'm not the only one singing this song about how nurses should get on LinkedIn.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
glad it's not just me
yeah,
because most band, especially band five, just feel, someone said to me, oh, I thought LinkedIn is just for if you're looking for a job.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, I thought LinkedIn is for just technical people. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, exactly. It used to be Twitter, though, didn't it? That, like, I remember at uni, they made us create a Twitter account and like post something about nursing on there. But I just don't find people use it as much now.
No,
No.
no.
Mm.
Yeah, so I think I use LinkedIn a lot, and
Mm.
the thing about LinkedIn is that when you connect with someone in a particular field, when there's anything around a particular topic, it just pops up and
Mm.
reminds you to say, "Are you interested?"
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So I
yeah,
think it's a good place to start, and I'm glad you're saying it as
yeah,
well. So
yeah.
nurses, band five nurses, get
Go
on
on
LinkedIn. Yeah, that's a good place to start.
find
Fantastic.
us on it.
Exactly, exactly. And there's something you've not talked about, and I was hoping you would mention it. It's your publication in the
Yes,
in the
yeah,
journal.
yeah.
Congratulations for having that
Thank you.
published. Because I'm
Yeah,
sure that's not a small feat at all. Tell us about that. Tell us a bit more
yeah,
about
yeah.
that.
So it actually came about again when we went to the Royal College of Nursing Foundation. So their celebratory event, there was journalists there, lots of different charities there as well that were interested in the work that we're doing, which is such a great opportunity to have people. So there might be other nurses that were on that in there celebrating and showing their QI work that also got interviewed. But there was a guy there that asked us a few questions about Rate My Shift and said that he'd love to publish us. So yeah, Annie and I recently have also applied for a few grants. So it was around that same time that we were able to really think about, okay, what do we want to publish? And it was we've touched on within the article is around like having real time data. To really have those insights, but also linking to the fact that there is so much research and literature reviews out there around, Ockenden and the Francis report and Lord Darcy,
Yeah,
that all
yeah.
said the same thing that we are saying that Rate My Shift
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
helps with. So with anything new that people want to see evidence, they want to see that it works. But we know that it works from this wealth of research from what they're saying is needed in order for staff to feel that they can, contribute and give good care. And like, you know, even little things like recently the Gallup report on engagement, so there's like, that's like a national report where it asks a lot of people certain things around their job, and engagement is dropping, and
Mm,
people are just going to work to pay the bills. And
mm,
if you have that in a clinical environment, it could be potentially quite dangerous. And
mm.
so it's how we increase that engagement, and part of that, 70% of that, is manager influence. And so if we can really show the importance through things like the Audazi and Octane and Francis report, and the importance of visibility with managers, or having that good rapport, or that option to kind of, you know, check in and rate their shift and stuff, that's kind of what the article is mainly touching on.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. And if you in the next 5 years,
Mm,
how do you think what's your projection like for Rate My Shift? How do you think it's gonna look like in the next 5 years?
good question. I'm due to do my 5-year plan actually.
Right, so this will be a good start
Yeah,
then.
good stuff. I'll write it down. I think for me, I would like to stay within my NHS role as long as I can. Because one, I love my team and I love the organization, but also you get those insights to not just support the business, but to remain like in it, if that makes sense, and have
Mm,
that credibility.
mm,
And so in 5 years, I'd love to be working for the business, because right now we've been doing it for 4 or 5 years, and just mainly, you know, evenings, weekends. We don't get any payment to ourselves, so we can't drop our hours. But we're at the cusp now where we are at the point where we could potentially reduce our hours and start paying ourselves. So in 5 years' time, I'd like to see how that kind of pans out. But also, I'd love to have more of a team working for
mm,
us,
mm,
like-minded people that understand the space that we're in, and nurses that, you know, want to create that change with us and come with us,
mm.
and passionate journey that we're on, and be, yeah, in at least 5 organizations would be great.
Yeah,
But yeah, and
good.
looking at that scalability, because that's something we haven't really looked at how that would be possible yet, but
Mm,
we know it
mm.
is, but we just want to see it.
Yeah, good, good, good. What you just now said reminded me the information you gave earlier on about the fact that what
Mm.
helped as well was because you had someone who was at the software developing
Yeah,
skill.
yeah.
Does that mean that as a nurse, if you want to go into this field, you need to
Mm.
find a friend that knows
I
that's
guess I
familiar with
yeah,
software
totally.
developing?
Or do the software yourself. I know like a few people, a few doctors that are on the clinical entrepreneur program, have created their own code. So they've created like their own, and the way that they're a code platform. So like with my website, that's just a website template. And that's just me dropping images into things. And like Canva is so good these days for, you know, creating logos and images and things like that. You can really do it without costing anything. I think I pay £120 a year for the website. So low cost, but like for the coding, you probably pay like a subscription, because I know an anaesthetist that's been, in the last year, she's created like for when she's operating, she likes to have like her what she's called a toolkit, and she's got like loads of different pieces of paper, and she wanted to create it an app version of it, and she's coded all of that stuff. So it depends how easy
Yeah.
it is, depends what you want from it, but also different organizations may also support you with that. And my previous organization didn't, but now learning from what's happened with me, but also as things are getting more innovative and we are relying on our teams and
Mm,
staff to
mm,
create that change within, organizations are becoming more commercialized and thinking of like, if we were to support an innovator, this could give money back into the organization. For example, if they were to support them and build, like pay for a software developer, they would own like a percentage of that product, and then every time that sells, that comes back into the organization, and we're giving back, I guess.
okay.
So I'd say yes and no. Find a friend if you can, um, but also that friend's always going to want something, aren't they? Like to do work that's, you know, not paid. But I happened to have a software developer at the time, which allowed us to prove concept, and now again I found another friend to build that second version. And there's value in making connections and also selling to your friendly organizations as well. But yeah, there are ways out there, and it depends if it's a digital solution or not. It might be that you have an idea, you go into the business mindset, and then you raise money. So there's things like Innovate UK is a grants funding. I've just applied for Women in Innovation for this year. It's apparently 5% likely chance to get it, but I did it anyway. And that's, they will give you, if you then have an interview after your application, and then if you're successful, that's about £75,000. That'd be the most money would ever have had, and that's a grant money. So there's things out there like the Royal College of Nursing where there is funding, but it's knowing and finding those people. So speaking to people like the health innovation networks and speaking to people that are in that space is key to that, and getting on like an entrepreneur program like I did, they'll be able to guide you through that as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. Um, this is my the last few questions. I promise. Last few questions. Right. There's a in my experience, right? There's a bit of a divide between clinical and digital, right? I heard nurses tell me, "Oh, I want to leave the bedside and get into digital."
Mm.
In my head, I don't think that's the right terminology because I don't
Yeah,
feel I'm leaving nursing to get into digital.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
a
yeah,
nurse and I will always be, right?
yeah,
But I
yeah.
think that it sounds to me there's a divide between, oh, that's clinical and that's digital when it should be together.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're creating a digital solution for clinicians, really, aren't we? So I'd say that they are one thing, and I guess it's the same with my role as a sister. I technically I'm not clinical anymore. I do say that to people, but I mean, I was following around a enhanced care observation patient the other day, and taking it down and seeing the garden and stuff. So like that, I can pick and choose, I guess, when I do that. But I used to always say I would always be at the bedside. I always said that I'm not interested in, going senior. I'm not interested in any of the academic stuff or even like digital and stuff like that because I didn't see myself as intelligent in that way. Um, and you end up following things that I personally follow things that um, one excite me, but two frustrate me. And that's why I think I've got to where I am because I saw not so great leadership and
Mm,
thought,
mm,
I think not even that I could do it, more so that like I started then supporting people around that because that person wasn't supportive, changing
mm, mm,
changing like shifts and skill mix, looking at the weekend shifts and changing people, phoning them and going, can you swap your shift to? So I realized that I wanted to do it and I liked doing it. And I guess it's what is there when people say like I want to leave and go to digital, like what about that? It
mm,
like seeks to excite them or frustrate them or whatever it is that
mm,
they is
mm,
their driver.
mm,
And like I've been doing a coaching qualifications that I'm close to ending soon. And a lot of coaching is around like really understanding people's values and people's needs to then understand why they behave or why they want certain things that they
mm.
want. And we assume, especially when there's this them and us within management, there always will be. I don't know how to get rid of it. Even now, I feel like I'm in a sister's position, but there'll be people that see me as the sister and see this hierarchy. When I try and explain, it's just a different role and different responsibility. We are the same equal level, but it's just a different job, really.
Mm,
But even in that, it's really trying to think about what it is that we are what doing differently and what value we can bring and why my needs are different to theirs. Like they might be more excited to have a really sick patient and look after a patient. I'm not interested in that anymore. I'd rather have a conversation with a colleague or do their appraisal. And yeah, it'd be
yeah.
interesting. Like if people going into that space, why? Like what
Mm,
excites them about that?
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head there. I think it's what I'm here. What I can hear for what you're saying is know yourself,
Mm,
and when you come to a place where you understand yourself and what you want,
mm,
as well as what you don't want, I think it's
mm.
easier to navigate your way.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and yeah, there's so many opportunities out there. We don't
yeah,
have to be a replica of somebody,
yeah,
but you can know yourself and then
yeah,
find your path by
yeah,
knowing yourself. Right?
yeah,
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 that's
yeah,
brilliant. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's been fantastic talking with you.
It's been great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm so glad today happened because I think the
Yeah,
first time I listened to you was during Nursing Live
yeah,
in
yeah,
Liverpool. I think you were on the stage with
yeah,
with
yeah,
your co-founder,
yeah.
and that was the moment I said to myself, I must find a way of bringing you to bed and bedside so that
Oh,
we can
that's
have
so
this
sweet.
conversation.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
so glad it's happened now.
yeah.
So
Me
thank you very much. Is there any way on a very last note now?
too.
So if you're going to talk to your student nurse self, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. You're going to
Mm,
talk to yourself, right? Have the
mm,
opportunity to sit with yourself, the student nurse that started years and years and years ago. What would you
yeah.
say to that student nurse?
Really, really good question. um, I would say that you're gonna find your sparkle, and so trust that you will, and you'll find what excites you, and it doesn't have to be what everyone else is doing.
Mm,
And you'll be great in the I think like nursing, I've not been a confident person all my life. And if people were surprised by that when I said I'm not
I am.
I'm a big overthinker. But I think in my job that's the one thing that I feel confident in. And
Mm,
if I would have told myself that, you will feel confident, you will find your sparkle,
mm, mm,
I think they'd know
yeah.
what I'm on about.
No, and that's honestly that's good. That's good to know. And on that note, I'm going to draw the curtain to our conversation today. But thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank
So
you
if
so much.
anybody would like to reach out to you for a chat, for a bit of motivation, where can they find you, please?
You can find me on LinkedIn at Olivia Crossing, or an email, olivia.crossing@ratemyshift.app.
Okay, and you're happy for me to drop that in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
video? Yeah, I'm just going to leave that at the end of the video. Right. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank
I hope
you
we can
so
have a
much.
longer time to have a longer conversation in the future. Lovely to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Liv.
you.
Bye.
Bye.